Hello students, this is Mrs. Gregorio and today we are covering Chapter 2, Lesson 2 on percent and estimation. Follow along with me beginning on page 111. Remember to write down any questions you have or pause the video if you need more time to take notes. Our essential question for this lesson is how can percents help you understand situations involving money? And today we're going to learn how to estimate the percent of a number and find percents that are greater than 100 or less than 1%. Right now, I'd like you to complete the What You'll Learn on page 111. So you need to scan the lesson on pages 111 through 114, and I need you to list 2 headings you would use to make an outline of this lesson. Then I want you to complete the real world link and I want you to answer questions 1 through 3 on page 111. You need to pause the video now and show all your work to receive credit for this assignment. Our key concept begins on page 112. It is about estimating the percent of a number. Sometimes we don't always need an exact answer when we use percents. In real life, we often estimate. So one way to estimate the percent of a number is to use a fraction. So I'd like you to circle that word fraction in your book or underline it. If you have a highlighter, you can also highlight it. So we're going to be using fractions to estimate percents. Another method for estimating the percent of a number is first to find 10%, the easiest percentage in most situations. Once you find 10% of a number, then you multiply it. For example, 70% can be broken down like 7 times 10%. So all you would do is find 10% of that number and then multiply it times 7 to get your 70%. Let's start with example 1 on page 112. It says Jody has paid 62% of the $500 she owes for her loan. Estimate 62% of 500. And as a review, the word of means to multiply. So let's take a look at 62%. We know 62% is pretty close to 60%. The word of means multiply, and so we're going to multiply it times the amount, which is 500. Now, I'm going to break down 60%. I can show you 2 ways. The book shows it to you as a fraction, so I'm going to do this method first. What I'd like you to do is, in the work zone, show both methods by taking the notes I'm about to write down with you. 60% is 60 over 100 as a fraction, but we know this can be reduced. 60 and 100 can both be divided by 20, which reduces to 3 over 5. Now, we can multiply 3 over 5, or 60%, times the 500. And I like to show it as 500 over 1, just so I can multiply straight across. Now, looking at the diagonals, I can cross out a common factor of 5. 5 goes into 500 100 times. 3 times 100 is about 300 over 1. It can just be written as 300. So it is about 300. The second way I would like to show you is not with a fraction. However, breaking up 60% as 6 times 10%. 10% of 500. All you have to do here is think place value. 10% is just 1 decimal to the left, so 10% is 50. Now that we found 10%, 6 times 50, or 6 times 10%, is 300. We got the same answer. In your book, when you see these squiggly lines here for the answer, you can say 62% is about 300. About is often used instead of an equal sign. We use this symbol. Okay, you might need to write that down so you remember. So 62% of 500 is about 300. Okay, let's move on to example 2. Marita and her 4 friends ordered a pizza that costs $14.72. She's responsible to pay 20% of the bill. About how much money will she need to pay? So we have a couple options. For step 1, we can go ahead and find 10% of the bill. Now, $14.72 can be estimated as about $15. Typically, it's better to round up, especially since it's closer to 15. Now, 20% is 2 times 10%. So first I'm going to find 10%. 10% of 15, all you have to do is move the decimal over 1 place to the left, and you get $1.50. Now, instead of 10%, we want to multiply that times 2 to get 20%. So $1.50 times 2 is $3. So if the total bill is $15, she's paying 20%. Then her portion of the bill would be about $3. Now, if I wanted to show you using a fraction, let me show you how I would do it with the second method. I would take 20% and write it as 20 over 100, which reduces if you divide the top by 20 and the bottom by 20. It reduces to 1 over 5. 1 over 5 times the bill, which is, remember, we're estimating $14.72 to about $15. So 1/5 of 15. Notice those diagonals can cross out the 5. That becomes a 1 and that becomes a 3. 1 times 3 is $3 over 1 is still 3. We got the same answer using the 2 different methods. Right now I want you to do problems A and B on page 112, and you need to show your work in order to receive credit for this lesson. Pause the video now and work out those problems. Okay, moving on to example 3. This begins on page 113, and now we're going to work with percents that are greater than 100, or sometimes you might have a percent that is less than 1%. You can also estimate these percents of numbers when the percent is greater than 100 or less than 1, and I'm going to show you how. For number 3, let's estimate 122% of 50. Well, 122%, let's round it to the nearest 10. I'm going to estimate this as 120% of 50. To begin, I can separate 120% as 100% plus 20%. So if 100% of 50 is 50, 20% of 50, well, I know 20% is, I know 10%. 10% of 50 is 5. So 20% would be 10. 50 plus 10 makes 60. So if you think about it, 120% is more than 100, so our answer should be more than 50, which it is. I'm going to show you a second way, and this is how the book shows you. For method 2, let's check to see if we get the same answer. 100% of 50 plus the additional 20% of 50. This time we're going to break it up into fractions. 100% is 100 over 100, which is really just 1. 1 times 50 is 50. 20% is 20 over 100, which reduces to 1 over 5. 1 over 5 times 50, those cancel out, and you get 10. So 50 plus 10 still gives you 60. And the reason why we estimate is so that we can use the percents as mental math. When you're at the store in real life, you may want to just use a quick estimation to find the percent. So using tens and 100% are typically easier to estimate in your head. Right now, I want you to try C, D, and E on page 113. Remember to show your work for credit and pause the video so you have time to work these out. Okay, example 4, page 113. There are 789 7th grade students at Washington Middle School. About 1/4% of the 7th grade students have traveled overseas. What is the approximate number of 7th grade students that have traveled overseas? And we need to explain this time. So let's just think for a moment of 1/4%. 1/4% means 1/4 per 100. That's less than 1%. That's smaller than 10%. It is a very small portion. So I want you to try to wrap your head around how small this percentage actually is. So 1/4% is really 1/4 of 1%. Instead of multiplying, let me rewrite that. Think 1/4 of 1%. It's really easy to find 1% of a number because if you have 789, 1% would only be 0.01. If we change 1% into a decimal, you just move the decimal 2 places over to the left. So it's 0.01. Now, since we're estimating, let's change 789 to about 800 students just to round it up to the nearest 100 and make it easy for us. If we know 1% of 800 to multiply, you know 1 times 800 is 800. You need to move the decimal 2 places to the left. Move it 2 places to the left and you get 8. 1% of 800 is 8. Now we need to take 1/4 of a percent. So you take 8. Let me get some more space to work this out. Okay, so 1/4 of 8 is 8/4, or you can cross cancel here. And that gives you 2. So out of 800 students, approximately only 2 7th graders have traveled overseas. Okay, and I'll let you write out that complete sentence. I'm out of space. But right now, I want you to try F on page 113. Pause the video so you have time to work that out. Okay, last problem is example 5 on page 114. Last year, 639 students attended a summer camp. Of those who attended this year, 0.5% also attended summer camp last year. About how many students attended summer camp 2 years in a row? So we're looking at the students from last year and this year. Now, what I would do is let's take 639 students and let's find 1%, because 0.5% is half of 1. So first let's find what 1% of 639 would be. I'm going to rewrite 1% as a decimal, 0.01. 0.01 times 639. All you do is take 639 and you move the decimal 2 places to the left to turn it into the decimal. So we get 6.39. Well, we can't have 6.39ths of a person, so let's just estimate that to about 6. 1% of 639 is about 6. But we don't want 1%. We want half of 1%. So half, or 0.5. Okay. Half of 6 is 3. You could work that out by showing it this way. Half of 6, you can do that in your head, or you can cross simplify. Half of 6 is 3, or you could do the decimal. 0.5 times 6, 5 times 6 is 30. Move the decimal 1 time to the left, and you still get 3.0, which is 3. So about, I'm going to write my sentence over here, about 3 students attended camp 2 years in a row. Okay, there's my explanation. And that is it for this lesson. Write down any questions or any examples that you found maybe a little confusing so we can go over those in class tomorrow. In class, bring your Chromebooks and your textbooks because we'll be doing the guided practice together in class, and we might also have some activities on our Chromebook tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you then, and I hope you have a great evening. Bye-bye.